All right, welcome to the Monterey Bay Nature Journal Club online sessions. I'm so glad to see all of you here. And let's see, I see some folks that might be new or I haven't seen in a while. So glad to have you. And if you can go down to the bottom of your computer screen and click on the little box that says chat, and in that box, why don't you let us know where you are zooming in from and something that you're feeling grateful for today. Maybe it's weather related or nature related or health related, family, whatever. One quick thing, whatever pops into your mind right away, that one thing you're grateful for, where you're zooming in from. And then everyone go down to the chat box and let's take a look and meet who's in the session with us. So I'm just going to give just a couple minutes here for everyone to type in where you're from. And let's all take a look. We've got a big group today. We have a special guest who is our regular member, Victoria Grape, who has the secret background as a moss studier, a bryologist, and she's going to share some really cool information about mosses, but also the focus today will be about exploration and making our own discoveries. So hopefully you had a chance to walk around your nature and collect a little piece of moss. And mosses are everywhere. We're going to jump into that when Victoria starts talking, where you can find mosses and how you can collect them. But if you didn't collect any moss, do not worry. We're going to take a short break in the middle of the session. We're going to mix things up today. We're going to be going back and forth because Victoria and I have some exciting things to show you today, moss related. I got goosebumps all over. I can't wait. So this is going to be really cool. Let's see. So for those of you who are here, just hopping in, go over to the chat, type in where you're zooming in from and something you're feeling grateful for today. And everyone go and take a look and see who is joining us. So I'm just going to zip over. We've got folks in Washington. Amy Sides is here from Alabama, and she's our co-host today, helping us out in the background. Thank you so much, Amy. Let's see, we've got folks from Virginia, San Diego, more from California, Seattle, New Hampshire, Slovenia, Manya, welcome, San Francisco, Peaks Island, Maine. That's so cool. Oregon, Massachusetts, Sebastopol, California, Monterey, Ohio, Montana, South Carolina. Oh gosh, we've got lots of folks from different states. Ohio, more from Oregon. Mike, welcome from the UK. North Carolina, Montana, Colorado. There's gratefulness for the sun, the blue skies, great trails and snow. Okay. Oh my gosh, this is really exciting. We've got the UK. What else? Santa Rosa. Everyone's excited about learning about mosses. I am too. I'll have to share that I had been noticing mosses for a long time. I have a patch in my driveway, and I just notice when it's in the wet season, it's slippery and we slip. So we have to kind of scrape away a little bit of it so that we don't slip on our way to the front door. And I noticed that it disappears in the summer and it always comes back in the winter, but I had never really looked at it very closely. So perhaps you guys might have some moss in your nearby nature that you've just, noticed it's there, not really taken a look. Well, today we're going to get a closer look at mosses. So first I'm going to share a few slides here. Okay, so welcome to the Monterey Bay Nature Journal Club. Today we're focusing on mosses, and before we get to the micro world of mosses, we're going to head over to a couple slides here. Sorry, I've got my phone set up as a microscope, so I'm going to need to check it once in a while and make sure it's not running out of batteries. I got it plugged in, but I had some issues, so that's why I had to step away. Okay, so some announcements. Those of you who don't already know, we have a Nature Journal sharing space online. that's open to any of you to come join us and share your nature journal pages, share some highlights, and let us know what you're finding in nature, and give some positive feedback and comments to those others in the community who are posting there. And the link is right there on the screen. I know it's hard to copy, but Amy's going to pop it into the chat later on. We have another special guest at the end of the month, January 31st. My friend Jan Loomis is going to share about her visit to Midway Atoll in the winter a couple of years ago. And we're going to take a virtual walk among albatrosses on this remote Hawaiian island. So stay tuned for more information about that. Registration is still open and still spaces available for a couple of my classes that's starting. One is starting next week. Spark Your Curiosity, that's an introductory nature journaling course. If you are feeling apprehensive or a little nervous about your drawing or writing skills, come join us. It's a friendly, small group online. It's interactive, and you can learn about how you can see nature and record that in your nature journal. In February, I'm starting a new class, Spark Your Bird Love with Nature Journaling. Anyone who is interested in birds or who loves birds or is a bird watcher or birder, whatever your interest level is and your experience, this is going to be a class where I'm sharing my tips and techniques in a nature journal that's helped me become a better bird watcher, and will help you enhance your experience around birds, not just identifying birds, but getting to know the little family of birds that's in your backyard, or the birds that come to your feeder, learning about their behaviors. So if you have any questions, you can always send me an email and we can chat. All right. I wanted to thank everyone for your support. There's a suggested $20 donation for these sessions, and it helps bring more of these free nature journaling sessions to all of us, to everyone, to make it accessible. And so if you are able to give, we really appreciate that, so that we can bring more to the community. And thank you for those of you who contribute. It really makes a difference to me, to help me be more creative, so that we can get more guests and more interesting topics here, so that we can journal together. All right, so for those of you who are new or newer to nature journaling, just a few slides here, just briefly to talk about what nature journaling is. So I describe nature journaling as basically observing nature and recording what you see. So the journal becomes this place where you can take what's around you, what your experience is, and putting it in a place where you can remember and deepen your understanding and curiosity. And we use 3 languages. We use words, sentences, labels, titles. You can see a couple samples here. Pictures in the form of drawings, sketches, icons, maps, little diagrams, and numbers, measurements and dates and times and counts. So by using these 3 languages on the page, it becomes a really great whole brain activity that helps us remember this experience. All right. And so start with the language that you're comfortable with. You know, whether it's words. If you're really comfortable with words, we'll start there and we'll add some sketches in there as we go along. If you are comfortable with drawings, let's start putting some words on the page. So as far as nature journaling goes, it's really, the focus is not about making a pretty page. So I know that many of us have encountered drawing in an art class, and the purpose of drawing in an art class is to make a representation of the thing we're looking at in an attractive way, right? Maybe the goal is to make it realistic. Maybe it's to capture all the detail, but we're not going to use drawing in that respect here in nature journaling. We're using drawing to learn. So when you sit down to sketch, in this example, an abalone shell, you're going to pay attention to little details that you will probably don't notice if I had handed you an abalone shell and said, hey, take a look, you know, and you just look at it for like 3 seconds. You don't notice all the details that you do if you sat and were going to sketch it. So in that process, you're learning more about your subject, and that's how we're using drawing, right? So we're not going to use drawing to make this this perfect picture. Actually, there's no perfect, right? We don't need to worry about making the picture look like the real thing, because that's not the purpose. It's about observation, about developing your skills of seeing, of being aware of your surroundings in nature, of details in nature, discerning patterns, and honing your skills, right, of being a naturalist and being aware, and developing your drawing techniques through practice. And the best part of it is tapping into your curiosity and sense of wonder. All right, and we use 3 prompts to help us out with that. One is, I notice, about your observations. What do you notice about what you're seeing? I notice this pine cone has a lot of little leaf-like structures. I notice it's hard. I notice it's brown. I notice it's really pointy on the edge. What do you wonder about it? Where did it come from? What tree did it come from? Why is it on the ground? Why does it have so many scales around it? It reminds me of, maybe it reminds you of, what does it remind me of? It reminds me, the top part reminds me of a crown, right? These little kind of little spines that stick out. Maybe when you turn it over, it has a spiral pattern. So connecting what you're seeing with something else that that helps you be more creative. Okay, and the focus with nature journaling, I invite you to come to nature journaling, set aside what you already know about nature, about these topics, about what you think you know. Because when we hold on to our vast knowledge, then we're less likely to be open to new knowledge. So we're going to adopt this attitude of beginner's mind, meaning we're going to sit here and say, I am not the expert of whatever the subject is, and I'm going to be open and excited and interested and curious about whatever comes up. Because when we come to nature with that attitude, we get to see more. So we're also making discoveries through your own observations. So although we have, some people that are now a knowledgeable person who's sharing about mosses, you're going to be making your own observations that Victoria can't see, that I can't see. Only you can see. So follow your curiosity. What is exciting about your clump of moss in your hand? What excites you? What questions pop up into your mind? And when you ask those questions, let's quiet that need to go to Google and look it up. Because when we sit with the not knowing and just ask the question and look at your subject and take a breath and ask another question, you're going to start diving into this world where juicier, more interesting questions are going to arise. So that when you come back to the moss or whatever it is, you're going to look again and you're going to have a new lens. So I encourage you to, share about how you are observing. That's kind of the focus of these sessions is, how do we observe nature? Not about expounding more facts, right? We can get tons of facts. We can learn a lot of stuff online from books, from other teachers. But today we're going to come together and we're going to learn, how can we look at nature? How can we look at the mosses? How do we nature journal these mosses in our journal? And so we're going to talk about that today. All right. And I think this means that we're going to my next slide. We're going to do some warm-ups, and I thought that it would be really, can you see this picture of the tree? All right. I thought that it would be really cool for us to do some like 1-minute gesture sketches. I don't have my timer, so I'm just going to kind of estimate about what 1 minute is, and we're going to do some sketches. So I'm going to get my nature journal out. So why don't you grab your nature journal, and I'm going to share my screen in a different way right now. And I'm going to share my desktop. Okay, and I'm going to move some things around. So that I'm going to sketch with you just to show you what I'm talking about with, we're going to make really loose, scribbly sketches. And this is going to warm us up for drawing any mosses that we have. All right, so we're going to look at, I'm going to go through a series of trees, and this warm up is not to draw the tree. The focus is just to warm up your eye, and your eye is going to look at the tree. It's going to go to your brain. Your brain is going to tell your dominant hand to draw something, and it just takes practice. So those of you who are new, it might feel a little awkward and weird, but the more that we practice, the more pencil miles that we put in, where it's going to get better. So don't worry about making your finished drawing look like a tree. Let's just look at like the main lines and do some scribbles. So hold your pencil lightly and or pen, and we're going to scribble this tree. And you don't have to do what I'm doing, but I'm going to show you my screen just so that you get a sense of what I'm talking about. All right, so actually I'm going to put today's date. I always like to put the date in here. Today is January 10th. You can do the date however you like. I have my own system. All right, so, and this is the Monterey Bay Nature Journal Club, and we're gonna do some warm-ups of trees. Okay, so I'm gonna just do some quick sketches. So just kind of get the dominant lines in there and then get a feel for what this tree is. I'm seeing like shelves, right? They're like straight lines coming off. And there's no right or wrong to this. This is just getting your hand and your eye warmed up. They kind of remind me of shelves. All right, here's my tree. Okay, and we're going to move on to the next one. We're going to do the same thing with this tree. Just light sketchy lines. They don't have to draw like long continuous ones, just sketchy ones to get the changes of the movement. I'm kind of doing the trunk because it's kind of darker right now, and then I'm going to add these clumps of foliage, and I'm just scribbling. Right, and so your eye is going to look at the picture and down at your page and back to the picture and back to your page, just going back and forth and just adding more and more scribbly lines. All right, and if this feels like it's going fast for you, just take a deep breath and know that you don't have to have a finished picture. We're just warming up our hand and our brain. I love the branches on this tree. All right, this is a pretty willow tree. Again, just use light scribbles. Don't worry about it looking like the tree. We're getting warmed up, and just look at the dominant lines. Like I see, it's like a waterfall or a beaded curtain hanging down from these branches. So I'm just making these vertical scribbly lines.
I'm not.
All right, and the next one. Ooh, I like this one. It's a beautiful madrone.
No, I do not enjoy it. Okay.
Oh, and if you are not muted, if you could take a look at the bottom of your screen and click the microphone so that you're muted, that would be appreciated. Such cool lines. Again, scribbles, there's no right way to do this. Your picture is going to look very different from mine. All right. Okay. Let's do this one.
Ooh.
Just lots of scribbles. And don't worry about perfect needles or branches. We're just looking at the major lines and getting them scribbled on our page. All right, again, we're not drawing perfect trees. Okay, all right, I think that's good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We did 8 little trees. All right. How did that feel? Yeah, so. No, oh yeah, I see like, yeah. For those of you who have never done this before, that's probably gonna feel a little weird, but some of you come every week and you've done this with me before, right? So the more that we do this, the easier it gets, right? Yeah, I see some nods of heads. So if you are new to drawing or, you know, maybe don't feel like your skills are advanced as you like them to be, it's okay. Anyone can learn to draw because it's a skill. It's not a gift or a talent. So you don't have to be born with artistic ability to do this. And you can improve your drawings with practice. So everyone's on the same, we start at the same place. So, and it improves with each stroke of the pencil. And we call it pencil miles. John Muir Laws just kind of gave it this really cool idea that the more pencil miles you put in, the better your drawing gets. So I kind of like that idea, pencil miles. So let's all put pencil miles, and you can put pencil miles in just like we did just right now. You could go online, you can go outside, you can look at photographs, do some quick sketches, because it's not about making the perfect tree. It's about the act of observing and getting your eye, brain, hand work together. All right, so I think, let's see, we did the tree warm up. I'm going to show a couple Nature Journal pages of how you might draw mosses, and then we're going to dive in with Victoria. So I'm going to share this screen here. All right, so this was just recently a couple pages of, and I have not drawn mosses very much. in my journal. Let me get my screen here. Because like I said, it has never been a part of the world that I had really noticed that much. But recently there were some trees that like were covered with lichen. You can see my scribble trees here. The branches were covered with lichen, and I didn't have to make perfect trees. I just did a scribble, wrote the words in, then did a little bit of close-up of like what the tree branch looked like, and then did some close-ups. And you can see it's not super detailed, but you can use a lot of words. We use a combination of words and pictures to express what it is that we're observing. So this does not look like a photograph of mosses because it doesn't have to be. Moss and lichen. All I have to do is to make two different kind of scribbles and call it moss and lichen, because the important thing is about our observation. What are you noticing about the moss and lichen? And that's what's important in a journal page. So we're freed from making a perfect drawing in nature journaling. Another example here was some mosses that I saw growing on a tree trunk next to some lichen. Often I see them growing together, so I had some questions about them. And then I did an experiment where I looked at some dry moss, put some water in it, and you know, these are just scribbly sketches, and then had my observations and questions. So this is what your journal page could be. It could be even simpler. It doesn't have to be, you know, a lot of pictures. We're adding words and pictures together. So I think with that, I'm going to shift over to stop my share, and I'm going to welcome our dear friend, fellow member, nature journaler, Victoria Grape. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself, and then let us dive into some mosses.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Melinda. And hello, everybody. I've been looking forward to this day for such a long time, and I'm really excited to see so many of you that are excited about mosses too. And yeah, Melinda and I, the last days, have been talking a bit about what this all is going to be about, and I'll let you in on this. Mosses are an incredible world of diversity, and we don't even have enough time to touch deeply into them, but we're going to try, and we're going to see where we get. And I'll share with you just now my slides, because it all begins with my very recent introduction to mosses. I'll see if I can now share my screen. There we go. And do you guys all see some woolly ladies?
Yes.
Yeah. You're probably wondering, why are we looking at sheep? But they're very important to why I'm even talking about mosses today. Because a few years ago, I had this exciting privilege to be joining a conservation research project. And I started with what Melinda talks a lot about, the beginner's mind. I was fascinated by a certain nature type, a habitat on the coast of Western Norway. And this project was trying to look at how climate change affects this particular habitat, and as well management practices like prescribed burning and grazing sheep. And I went up to them and I said, what are you not covering in this project that you're dying to have somebody spend time with? And they all said, mosses. And I said, all right. Little did I know that was going to be really going to take me somewhere special in my life. Here you've got me squinting in the harsh winter of Norway. There's a smile beneath that hood. I can attest to it. There was a book, Gathering Moss by Robin Walkemer, that carried me through my studies about mosses and has been with me ever since. It's a gem of a book, and I highly recommend it to anybody who just simply cares for the natural world. And certainly she speaks with such warmth towards these organisms in a way that very few I've ever heard been able to. And I know Melinda can attest to hearing her voice in an audiobook speaking about mosses is just so heartwarming and magical. So this was just a few years ago that I started looking into mosses, and so I can still not call myself an expert. And actually, even the experts, some even say that, you know, we are just touching the surface. There are so few people interested in mosses, and there's so little we know about them. And I think that's what I want to share with you today is what I love most about mosses is that they are so mysterious, and we might never, ever touch upon the depth of their beings. And that's a great thing, because that is where wonder is, in my mind, at least. And here I share with you the first photo I took when I arrived to this lovely little island to begin the field work. And I had never looked at mosses. I'd just gone by, like, I don't know how many of you guys out there have walked by moss and just figured, that's moss, a moss. But when you then are asked to, or you start looking deeper into these details, it will blow you away, the diversity, all these strange forms, shapes, functions that they have to live in a very special, I guess, microsphere or micro habitat of the world. And I thought, Melinda, this was a great warm-up to begin with, because we can kind of see moss ecosystems, moss communities as great forests in miniature. And I don't know about you guys, but I felt after doing so many sketches that it was quick. My mind started getting away from, gosh, I have to make this, you know, represent what it is. And I started feeling a lot of stability from seeing all these trees and being so quick at sketching them and just going, right, okay, you know. Well, anyhow, back to the mosses. This is just going to be a very brief overview, and I'll be happy to talk more to whoever's interested, more detail. But just, I saw some people in the chat, they were asking what's the difference between moss and lichen. And quickly, I'll just touch upon that. Mosses are plants, while lichen are a symbiosis of algae and fungi. And sometimes they might look similar, but mosses will never have the bright colors that some of the lichens in the world have. These, you know, they may have like a dusty pink color or bright orange or a very crisp white. Some lichen can look a bit green, but that's often when they're wet, because that's when the algae can kind of shine through with their greenness that they might have. And within, so back to the mosses then, they are plants. They have leaves, lichen don't. They might have leaf-like forms, but if you look closely, you'll see that there will be a difference. You'll see true leaves on the mosses. And mosses come in these three divisions. So you have bryophytes, which is the big group. And then you have mosses, which are the ones that we're going to see most often. They're the most prolific and diverse. And then you have liverworts and hornworts, fun names. Melinda has had the joy to actually meet a very interesting looking liverwort that I hope she'll share with us later. It's very special looking. And what all these miniature plants have in common is that they are the ancestors of all of our taller plants, all the vascular plants that we see in the world. They have almost remained unchanged for 350 million years. They were the algae, essentially, that evolved to become the first terrestrial plants. And yeah, the kind of evolutionary success they've had is astounding. They're still here today. They still cover all parts of the world. And even though they are completely dependent on water to reproduce and nourish themselves, They can even be found in deserts. They can be found in tropical rainforests, in tundra, anywhere. And yeah, spoke a bit about how we can differentiate them from other plants. They don't have roots. They have something called rhizoids where they can attach to things, but those roots don't function like regular plants' roots do. They have no flowers. They have other structures like what you see here on the photo, these little caps and long stalks. And like I said a bit earlier, they don't have the vascular system that higher plants have. They basically will nourish themselves with water and nutrients when water is there. When water is not there, they go into stasis. They literally just shut down their metabolism, and they can remain that way sometimes up to hundreds of years, and a drop of water and they continue life. And that to me is just fascinating. And so these are some pictures that I took during this field work, and I was just starting to see so many different shapes. And all these questions started popping into my mind, and I was so happy that I had that beginner's experience, being just having the opportunity to spend months only looking at mosses. And so here we see some of the diversity of shapes. Started pulling some apart from the samples in the experiment sites, and I was looking at how they might, in form and function, be affected by climate change and different management practices. And I can't not talk about mosses and not mention what happens in the water drops that are nestled in between their leaves. If you've heard of them, then you'll recognize this little funny looking thing as a tardigrade or a water bear. And they're kind of the charismatic, what do you call that? Oh, I can't remember the name, but anyhow, they're very charismatic, and they live a life completely reflected to that of the mosses, that if they dry out, they essentially go into stasis, and then a drop of water and they live again. These will live long past us, before humans or after humans are gone. Here, I'll just show you quickly some photos of where you can find moss. They can grow on tree trunks, branches, leaves on the ground, tiles, urban surfaces. Here we have a water hose. And they will grow in between other vegetation on the ground, again on rock, really any surface, because they don't need to attach to soil, and usually they will actually be outcompeted by other plants on soil. I'm just gonna again quickly here show you some examples of how I have journaled mosses, and I could definitely spend more time, but for me, and I agree with Melinda there, that what I get most out of looking at mosses is leaving the artist mind and practice behind and being quick, because it frees me up to ideas, to discovery, and wonder. And so I'll usually start with just a very quick, it feels like these tree sketches of the general form. And that's when I'm not thinking about the drawing, that's when the ideas pop in. And then I start coming up with these questions, and I notice things. Gosh, this one, when it's dry, it crunches. Like you can audibly hear it. It's crunch, crunch, crunch. Oh, I see there's a red stem. I wonder why that's red. This color reminds me of hay. Oh, that's interesting. It almost smells a bit like hay when it's dry too. And these kind of sense impressions are also what makes this memory memorable. It's something that you're going to remember next time you see this moss, and you go, "Hi, friend, I remember you. You crunch." And I think that's much more important for us than knowing their names, which anyhow are super complicated and not that great. I mean, big shaggy moss really is kind of cute, but and here on the right, you'll see a bit more of like how I might think of things that I can't see, and something that Melinda and I talked a bit about, which is wind, and this thing about a boundary layer, which is essentially the crust of the earth, or like all surfaces on the earth where wind is very still. And that's actually the limiting factor of how high a moss can grow, which is interesting. And so, yet knowing this, there's so much more I don't know. So I keep asking questions. I put little question marks. I keep going, draw quick diagram things. And I like to, if I can, put something that's a bit of a wonder. And yeah, I try to speak to the mosses. If that sounds a bit too out there, I write sometimes a bit of poetry or make some fun little drawing that's maybe not so much about the science. Let's see, I think that's, oh yeah, this is a more sciencey and maybe a bit more precious of a drawing where I could spend more time. And I just want to show that that's possible. But again, what I said just earlier about the other one, when I just freed myself up and just, did really sketchy lines, my drawing artist mind could take the back seat, and I got a lot more questions. See, there's actually not so many questions here. There's some metrics, there's some numbers and things, but yeah, again, your nature journaling practice is each your own, and I guess here we're just showing the many ways that you can, and I think that's about it for here. Melinda, if it's all right with you, I'll talk a bit about harvesting moss.
Yes, I would love to. Before you
Yeah.
jump in, thank you so much. This is just so rich with just beauty in your language and the way you share. A lot of people have lots of questions, so I want to encourage everyone to hold on to your questions. Can you write them in your nature journal, and so that we can save them to the end, so that everyone's really focusing on what Victoria is sharing with us. And then we will make some time at the end of our call to answer more, these, biological and ecological questions. So let's tap into our curiosity and sense of wonder and jot them down in your journal. All right, thanks.
Brilliant. Really happy to hear. I haven't been seeing the flow of questions coming, but that's great. I'm really excited. You guys have so much curiosity. I'm going to play a little video. Unfortunately, the sound was quite awful. So instead, I'm just going to be speaking to you about harvesting moss. And this was something quick I took on my phone. It's just our backyard. So you'll see here, there's just these gorgeous mats of moss that continue all on the floor of this little orchard, where there's some hazel, some pear trees, some pampas. And so what I do is I walk around, I get a bearing for what's around here. I'm noting that's lichen, bright orange, but there's some little moss. And I just get my bearings, and again, think about how big we are compared to the moss. And think about, again, this forest analogy is really great. If you can try to imagine yourself on the moss's scale, think about how much of an impact you'll have if you take a big swath of it. So here I'm noting all the different areas that there's moss, and I can see, it looks like to me, it's all the same species, but I'm trying to look for any differences. So I'm not taking all of just that little species that happen to occupy that little spot there. I'm looking for the fruiting bodies, which we'll look at more afterwards when we look at our moss. And I'm now walking to a place where I know there's a lot more of the same moss that was on the other tree, but I feel more comfortable taking moss from something that's much more well established. And this is no matter if I know if it's a rare species or not, I just really respect it as a being. And I'm looking around to see the health of it and everything. And again, it's not something I might know the health of a moss, but I'm just trying to see if I can sense something. Yeah, so I'll just take my finger and scrape a little bit off. And it's literally not much more than a nail size, depending obviously on the shape and structure of the moss, but I'll just take that much. That's about it. And yeah, I feel happy with that. That I'll have plenty to look at under the loop back at home. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna, if I can't look at it at that same day, I'm gonna look at it another day, and I can put it in a little envelope. And so what I do is I just take paper, printer paper, and I make little envelopes. And I'll then write exactly where I found it, because it's maybe hard to remember the small details of, was it on what side of the branch, north, south facing, which branch, because though that may seem like a super detailed thing, on their scale, it does mean a difference. So you see, I just have written some metadata, where we are, the weather, the date. Did I see any of their reproductive structures? And so I just stick it there in the envelope. What also works is like unbleached coffee filters, or just like, reusable tea bags. And yeah, that's it basically. It's just a good thing to remember is just that bit about the scale of us as humans. Try to imagine yourself on their scale, and be sensible and respectful when you harvest. You can always go back and look more and take a little bit more, but just remember that what you take might be the last of something. So just look diligently. I think we'll just end there, really. We've got some really cool photos, and Melinda's got an awesome setup with some demonstration of hydrating a dry moss. Here, what I can suggest you guys, if you have a magnifying glass, you can put it to the camera of your phone, and then on your screen you can get an even better look without having to squint if that's a trouble for you. So Melinda, we can take a look at these photos. We can also go over to your very cool setup.
Yeah, let's see. I'm going to share maybe a couple of photos of, since we're talking about the different mosses. I love, like, these mosses are different from what I'm going to show you. Let me just look at my view. I love this one on the top. That is, hold on one second. I'm going to change my view. Gallery. I guess it's on the top right. That looks just so fluffy. It looks like looks like, reminds me of yarn. I have some yarn that that looks like that. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen and show you. Let me find. Hold on one second. Stop. And share screen. Continue. Desktop. Share. Okay. It was here. Where'd it go?
Oh yes, that is
okay.
Really cool.
So just real quick, showing some different kinds of mosses, a little bit different from what Victoria found in France. I'm in California, central coastal California, and this is a little bit blurry, but you can see they look like miniature forests, like tiny plants. And the mat of moss is probably only like a centimeter tall, so pretty small. The liverwort that Victoria was talking about is related to the mosses, and I'm going to show you where I found some liverwort. This is in a creek in north of where I'm at in Aptos, which is south of Santa Cruz. My friend Holly and I went for a hike, and we found this really beautiful area that was moist and wet. And here's an old redwood tree that had fallen. And check out what's on this tree. It's all green, covered with moss. And what caught my eye was this, see that rock over here, the boulder that's covered with green that looks kind of, I don't know, looks like green, like seaweed. Like I'm thinking of algae that you would find in a tide pool. Well, there was one that was closer. So I went up to it, and the side of this rock was covered with this kind of like sheet-like structures. I'm like, this is strange. I've never seen this before. And here is what I found. And I had no idea what this was, but something in my head was saying liverwort. I've never seen a liverwort before, but I briefly learned the name when I was in biology and probably in my ecology class. And Victoria and I, before the call, were looking at this and wondering what it could be. So this is a mystery that is yet to be solved. And it's okay that I don't know the name of this, because what I'm going to do now after talking to Victoria is I need to go back to this spot, and Victoria gave me some new things to look at, to use my nose to smell it, because there is a type of one of the mosses that might have a smell. So I'm going to use my nose. I'm going to touch it with my finger. What does the texture feel like? Turn over these little leaf-like structures. What does it look like on the back? And then perhaps, because it's completely covered with these leaves, I'll pick a small one, maybe on the outer outskirts on the edge, and just bring one home. And I'll do the little envelope that Victoria just showed us and bring it home so I can get a better look. And I'm going to share with you what I do with harvesting, what I teach my students when I take them out in nature connection walks, is I look at the collection, the colony, and I ask permission to if I may take one of its members, for me to learn a little bit more about it, or maybe it's something to make a tea, or maybe it's for medicine. And I ask and wait to get a sign. Sometimes you just get this inkling. It's like, okay, no, I'm not going to collect this one. I'm going to move on to this next group. And so I listen to that intuition, and I wait, and I will collect only from the colony that says, yes, you may take some home. And if this sounds weird to you because it's new, it's, that's totally okay. And you can just, like set it off to the side. But this is my process of honoring these individuals that have been here for, what did Victoria say? 350 million years. So we are really young on this planet compared to some of these other beings that are here, and we want to honor them and learn from them. So I wanted to share that was a really cool liverwort. You can see they look like cells, right, that are just collected together, and they're not vascular plants like our plants in our garden. So they're very unusual. So I'm going to just show you a few different pictures. On the back of that rock was this other kind of thing that we're not exactly sure what it is, but when I go back there, I'm going to take a closer look, and maybe with my magnifying glass, I'll be able to see some more structures on that. Oops, I think I can't zoom in on this view, but they're like little leaves. Here's a patch of moss that was growing all over the redwood trees, and I put my hand in there for a sense of scale. So you can see it's really like bushy and thick and this bright green. And it grows even on dead things. So this branch of a tree was on the ground, and it was being colonized by a decomposer, right? Fungus are decomposers, and they grow on things. And so nothing goes to waste in the forest, in nature, ever. And so these are turkey tail fungus that are growing on this branch. And along with it, check this out, some moss. And what I noticed is there's like really fluffy moss on the left, and then these long branches on the right that look like vines. So my questions I had is like, is this the early stages of the moss, and then it colonizes and it grows bigger and bushy, or are they two different kinds? And I don't know the answer to that question, and that's totally okay. That's something that you put in your nature journal. And then the next time you come across moss, maybe you have that question in the back of your mind, so that maybe the moss will give you the answer the next time you look. some close-ups of the turkey tail, but also see how the moss, they look like little tiny, tiny branches that are flat vines that are on the surface of that log. All right, now moving over to a different forest, an oak woodland, and these are California live oaks. And here's a picture right here of live oaks. This is my friend's property in her yard, and she has all of these oak trees. And check out this oak tree on the tops of these branches, this dark stuff. This is all moss, and this pink stuff on the opposite side is a kind of lichen that grows on this particular species of coast live oak. So I'm going to go and do a close-up here. So you can see the lichen down here, the pale, dusty, very pale pink, and there's moss growing next to it. Now that we've listened to Victoria, I'm wondering if maybe these are two different kinds, these little ones here and these tall ones. I don't know. I'll just have to go back and check it out. So just some more views of the lichen, or excuse me, of the moss. And I went to look for a section on a tree that had a really big patch. And then I took my fingernail and scraped off on the bark to collect a little piece. And this is what I collected, and I brought it into the house, and I was house sitting for a friend. So I thought I'd do this experiment. A couple months ago, I collected the moss, and I remember Victoria telling me that you can just put some water drops on it and it'll come to life. And I thought, no way, I've got to see this for myself. So I put some water on it, and after 30 seconds, it started to open up. Like, check this out. Isn't that cool? These little branches that are opening can go back to what it was when it was dry. So I don't know how long it's been closed. I mean, it gets misty in this area, so I suspect that it has enough moisture that it probably comes alive, during the fog. And then I let it sit for, so that's 30 seconds. Then after 7 minutes, I took another photo, and it opened up a little bit more, but it didn't open up that much more than after the 30 seconds. So I was really surprised at how quickly it opened. So that is one kind of moss. Another kind of moss is something that I find on my walk out in my nearby nature. There's a lot of this kind of moss. See how the leaves are more rounded instead of pointy? And this is what it looks like from a distance when I'm walking. It's mixed in with these weeds and some sticks and pebbles and other, weeds that are growing. But I suspect this is going to get bigger over the next few weeks as it gets more moisture, and it'll start, perhaps start growing. So these are some mosses. I think this might be the same kind. So I have a couple kind of mosses that, oh, wait, one more. This is a park that's nearby my house. This is just to show where you might find some mosses. So walking around, check out how there's green everywhere. There's these grasses, and there's some weeds, and I don't have a picture of this tree close up, but you can see from here that it's covered with green. So, go for a walk and go to where there's green and take a look. It might be algae, it might be some lichens, but it might be mosses too. So it's going to be maybe a mixed forest, kind of like a mixed forest that we might encounter, in a bigger mixed forest, like it's deciduous and conifers. Maybe it's mosses and lichens that are in your miniature forest. All right, so moving on from the pictures, I want to share with you, let me find myself here. Oh, before I do that, I'm going to show, so here's another moss that you may commonly find in a craft store. When I used to own a flower shop, and I would buy tons of this because I'd use it to cover the bark of orchids to hold in the moisture, because orchids are epiphytes, so they don't have true roots, kind of like these guys, and they just hold these air roots inside the bark, and by covering it with some moss, it helped the moisture stay in for the orchids. So I would buy these. You can buy these in bags at the craft store. It's called sphagnum moss, and it's not a species, it's a group of different types of mosses. And so I don't know if you can see. That's what it looks like. It might be familiar, kind of dirty on one side and green on the other. So I've taken a little piece of that, and I'm gonna share this screen. So I've got a few different views here. All right. So I took that moss and then I took a little bit in here and then I got it wet. And then it fluffed up and it has a brighter green color. I'll show you. Next to it, here's the dry stuff. And oh, maybe you can't see it so well, but it gets kind of clear and translucent, and it's opening up like little trees. All right, so you could be, I'm gonna show you a really cool view. I'm gonna shift over to, stop my share. We're gonna go over to Melinda's other screen, and this is a close-up of that same one. Let's see if I can move it so we could see a little bit better. So this is a 10x view. Whoops. Of the structure.
I'm just gonna pop in really
Yeah.
quick to clarify, because it's an interesting thing with the kind of moss that you can buy here at the craft store, and they'll call it sphagnum.
Yeah.
Is the same name that they often use in like compost amendment and growing mediums for vegetables and things. But what we have here is in fact not sphagnum. It's a very different, completely different group of mosses. But I think what happens often with these things is a name sticks, you know? Yeah. So yeah, always good to know. And with try to see if you can find a sustainably harvested certification scheme on these purchases. It's very important because the bogs that they get harvested from, some places are certainly not sustainably harvested because they grow really slow. So that was a little.
Yeah, and it's confusing because I understand that mosses don't have common names. And so in order to market to the public, someone's got to put a label on it. And so then it gets clumped, right? They collect a whole bunch of different kinds of species, and they just give it this common name of sphagnum moss because that's what we can identify with.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, so that's
a really.
So that's one close up. And now we're going to do a really cool thing. I'm going to show you a piece of moss that I collected from an oak tree. Let's see if I can get some light on there. You know, this reminds me of cypress, the way that it's closed, like scales on a cypress. That's a good, it reminds me of. So maybe what we'll do is right now, why don't you take your nature journal and sketch what you see. I'm going to try to get this into a position where it is focused. I think. Sorry, I'm trying to get it in the center. It's a little tricky with my setup. I've got my iPhone with a jeweler's loop attached to it, set up as another participant. So, okay. So let's see if maybe we can sketch what we see, and then just in nature journal style, let's write down what we notice and wonder about this. And then I'll give you a measurement of the clump in just a second.
Melinda, can you tell us where you found this moss again, please?
This was found on a coast live oak tree. So what I might do is just make these pencil-like projections and then do a zoom in and just do one close up, like on my page. Sorry about that. Hold on one second. And so write down a couple things that you notice about this on your page. And you can, if you have an I notice, go ahead and you can maybe, how about type it in the chat if you have a couple of I notices in there, and then we can all see what we're observing. I notice and I wonders. Oh, cool. Louise says it looks like asparagus tips. Yes. Dragon scales, a tight knit, layered scales. I notice all the layering on just one stem. Yeah, all those like layers, like scales that are overlapping, like let's see, asparagus. Like a tight braid. Yes, that's right, Jan. Oh, right. Like that cord, right? That we use twine. Not twine. What is that poly line, right? That's all braided in that kind of neat way. Snake skin. Yeah. So Julie's asking what'll happen if we add water. We're going to do that. But right now we're going to do the before section because I only have this little piece. And I want us to get a good sense of the dry, what it looks like. Yeah, okay, so you've got your I notices and your I wonders, and it reminds me of. I notice that it's a pretty bright green, and I notice that they're all kind of equally about the same width. I noticed that the tips are a little bit more fluffed open than the sides are. Like closed equisetum. Yes, yeah, that horsetail. Reptile scales. Oh, the size. Yeah, let me get my ruler. All right, let's see. I'm gonna say that each of those leaves are about 1.5 centimeters long. How do I want to do this without moving it so much? Okay, I'm gonna put it under my document camera so you can see the whole cluster. Let's do that, and then we can do the zoom out. All right. Zoom. Gosh, it is not very, I'm glad we have this other setup because this is just not really giving me any detail. Ah, okay. All right, this clump is about 35 millimeters wide and 20 millimeters across. So I might do that kind of clump here, draw and say it's 35 millimeters and 20 millimeters. Like this, I might just do, this is the clump. I also notice that it looks like they're all standing up and there's, looks like dirt on the bottom, but maybe this is the bark of the tree. I don't know. I'm just going to write that down. It looks like a sheet of dirt that it's all attached to, or is it tree bark? So I'm going to make a note here. Bottom has dirt or possibly tree bark, question mark. What else do we notice about this? It reminds me of fur. Someone said it looks like broccoli head from one of these angles. It looks like a like a shag rug or carpet, like a green one. Green shag carpet. All right. So yeah, get your I notice, I wonder, it reminds me. If I know it's hard to see this, we're just practicing this so that when you go to your own moss, you have a little bit of little idea of how you might approach this. Okay, now I'm going to go over to back over. I'm going to swap back out to my other view and let's see what happens when we get this guy wet. Just a little tricky too. It's like backwards and moving around here. Trying to find a good little spot that we can watch. Okay, maybe that's a good spot. Right there. Okay, set up my light. Oh, that's so good. Okay. All right, so I have some water here in a little dish and a little, a big eyedropper. So I think I'm gonna take this eyedropper, we're gonna drop some water, and just for fun, we're gonna drop just a couple drops at a time and see what happens. All right, are you ready? See if I can find the right spot here. Whoa, look at the color change. It's just soaking in. Oh, check out that water droplet going down, being soaked in. Oh, let me find another tip. You can see it opening. You guys, check that out. Oh my gosh. Let's see if I can get this dry one. Right, that one. Oh, so you too can have this joy at home when you find your little moss buddy and start giving some drops of water. Oh, whoa, the water wicks up. Wait a minute. That one wicked up from below. That's so cool. All right, we're just going to add some water. And then I think I'm going to separate a little section so we can see it a little bit better. Let's see here. I have a pencil. Yeah, you can see the leaves that have opened up. All right, let me take a picture of this screen. Oh my gosh. So are you guys finding this to be really cool? Wow. You know what? Someone asked what kind of water. These mosses are going to be happy with whatever water, right? Because it's like rainwater that's outside. But look how fluffy it is. So let me see if I can maybe loosen up a little piece so that we can get it, see it a little bit more close up. Okay. And the tricky thing is getting the height right. Okay, it needs to be higher up. Okay. Is that better? Oh, a little bit more. So this is totally inexpensive makeshift. I'm using stacks of index cards to raise my Petri dish so that I could get it up to the right level. So anyone can do this at home if you have a phone and a little magnifying little loupe. Ah, sorry. Does it need to go higher? Oh yeah, it needs to go higher. All right, thanks for your patience, everyone. This is just an experiment that we're doing today. Here we go. There. Can we see that? Oh, and I can zoom in on my phone too. So now we can sketch what that little section looks like. And this could be the after. So we have before water, and then we add water. And after. Oh, someone's saying it reminds me of the paper water experiment. Are you talking about the paper on a straw where you scrunch it up and then remove the straw and you have the little caterpillar and you add water and it expands? So this is at 10x magnification, optical, from my little jeweler's loupe. I could probably stack another one and zoom in even more. And if you were just looking at this on your phone, you can zoom in from your phone. I'm not sure why it's not letting me zoom in. It might be because it's in Zoom as a participant. I'm not sure, but for this experiment, you can see that it's opened up right away, and it's just really bright, vibrant green. So write your I notice and I wonder and reminds me of, and then I'll just give you like another 30 seconds to wrap up. Yeah, the first time I did this, I put water in a bowl and like a little bit of water in a shallow dish, and then I put my moss in it. But I think it's more fun to like drop by drop, or maybe like a half a teaspoon at a time, or just to watch the action, I think is really cool. Victoria, do you have anything to add to what we're seeing?
I think it's a great time to actually spotlight some of the questions that have come up, because what we see here is this wonderful adaptation to being completely dependent on water, right? And what did we see when they were all dried up? They had just closed right up in that last moment of holding on to the last bit of moisture. And certainly, what do you guys think happens when the leaves are open and there's rain? I think of them as like umbrellas on, like turned around, you know, like catching more. Yeah, and it's mesmerizing how something also can go from looking like opaque to glistening, almost, you know, translucent emerald. And all your reactions are just so great. Your exclamations. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So we can go, and if you've had a chance to collect some moss, you know, put in a little dish and get to know your moss, and draw what you can see and write down what you notice about it, you know, what you wonder, what it reminds you of. One thing I didn't notice about this moss the first time is the colors. It looks like it's browner down by the stem, and it still kind of opens up like little leaves. So I'm really curious about why that is, but you know, that's just another noticing that you'd have. Maybe you have some noticings about the branching or non-branching, and what the rhizoid part, that I might look at that too, because they don't have roots, but they have attachments to their substrate called rhizoid. So I might actually take a look at that part of it under this microscope. So if you have your own moss, why don't you go and grab your journal, take a look at what you have in your nature, because we're from all around the world today, and everyone is going to find a different kind of moss, and would love to see what you find. So one idea is do the zoomed out view. That's like the whole moss, right? The whole clump of moss. Take a ruler and measure it. You know, how many millimeters or how many centimeters wide or tall. I didn't measure the height of this clump actually. So measure how tall it is. Take other kinds of metrics. How many of the stems do you see? Do you have like those little stalks in your clump? Or maybe you have a different kind that looks more short and stumpy. You know, how many of those do you see? What colors are they? Is it all the same green? Does it have different shades of green? And so do the notice, wonder, it reminds me of, with your dry moss, if you have dry moss. And then don't worry about getting all the detail in the zoomed out. Remember what we did with trees? We did scribbles. So scribble your moss, and then maybe choose one little section to zoom in on. I don't know if I showed what mine looks like, and it's hard for me to draw, do this while I'm talking. But I'll show you that this was before it was more rope-like and it was kind of fluffy on top, and I'll probably add a little bit more detail. I added water, and then it fluffed up and all the scales opened up. So it doesn't have to be perfectly what you see in the picture. Use words to describe what you see. Sometimes that's, you know, using words and pictures together as a team. can really help your nature journal come to life. All right, so this is about your curiosity and your observations, not about making it look pretty. So if you find yourself, like, I really liked what Victoria said when she said, it's when she's in the drawing state of mind, the artistic state of mind, that it interferes with her curiosity. So just be aware of you, that shift in your head. If you are comfortable with art and you find yourself drawing this artistic piece, then maybe step back and say, okay, let me shift into curiosity mode. What do I see? And start with the basics. Who, what, where, when, right? What are you seeing? All right, so it is 11 o'clock Pacific right now. So how about if we take half an hour to go and collect some moss if you didn't collect any already. Go outside and look down at the ground, look at the trunks of trees, look at between the sidewalk, the cracks, and see if you might find some little moss neighbors outside. And then maybe sketch it in outside in its landscape, and then come back inside and look at it close up. And then we'll come back at 11:30, so in 30 minutes, and we'll share what everyone's seen. I would love, love, love for you guys to come back and tell us about what kind of moss you saw. All right, you don't have to show your page, but if you do, it actually helps all of us, because it's not about a pretty picture. This is not about artistic skill. This is about your observation in nature. We want to share what we've observed. So I'm going to send you off with that. You can log off and come back in, or you can just turn your video off and walk away and come back. And I'm going to answer some, looks like Libby has some questions. So I'm going to shift over and see what Libby. Oh, the pencil
I'll be
is
drawing
cute.
along with you.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm going to leave it here, and it's so three-dimensional. It's hard to focus on the whole thing, but I think part of it's in focus.